When the notorious Crimson Serpents motorcycle gang decided to shake down a quiet lavender farm in Pine Ridge County, they thought they'd found an easy target. Instead, they encountered a former Navy SEAL combat medic who would transform their failed intimidation into the most extraordinary brotherhood of second chances their state had ever seen. The morning fog rolled thick across the purple fields of Hope Valley Farm, where Marcus Doc Reynolds methodically tended his rows of lavender plants. His weathered hands, equally skilled at field medicine and farming, moved with practiced precision through the fragrant blooms. 15 years as a Navy SEAL combat medic had taught him the value of dawn patrol, checking his crops as meticulously as he once checked his team's medical supplies in far deadlier fields. "Doc, you're at it early again." Sarah Chen's cheerful voice carried across the misty field. The retired Army nurse who'd found her own peace running the local veterans clinic approached with her usual offering, a basket of fresh scones and herbal tea made from his own lavender. Her weekly visits had become as much a part of his routine as the sunrise. "Someone has to make sure these blooms stay healthy," Doc straightened, accepting the tea with a grateful nod. "Hannah would have loved what you've done with her recipe." His voice softened at the mention of his late wife, whose dream of a healing garden had brought him to this quiet valley after her passing. "She'd be proud, Doc. This place helps more vets find peace than any therapy session I run." Sarah set her basket down on a weathered work table. "Besides, your lavender oil is the only thing that helps Jim Peterson's PTSD episodes. Speaking of which..." The distant rumble of motorcycles cut through the morning quiet. Sarah's face tightened with concern. "The Crimson Serpents. Third time this week." Doc continued calmly trimming his lavender stems. The Crimson Serpents were getting bolder since their new leader, a man called Viper, had taken control. 2 farms had already folded under their protection racket, and rumors spread about worse things happening to those who resisted. The peaceful valley that had once been a haven for retired veterans was slowly being strangled by fear. "Sheriff Martinez says they broke Kevin Zhang's arm at his family's apple orchard," Sarah whispered, her hands clutching her medical bag tighter. 3 generations they've worked that land. Now they're talking about selling. These aren't just thugs, Doc. They're organized. Dangerous. Last week they torched Bill McKenzie's barn just for missing 1 payment. The motorcycles grew louder. Sarah gathered her things, shooting Doc a worried look. "Don't do anything reckless. These aren't troubled teens looking for direction. They're apex predators. The kind that enjoy the hunt as much as the kill." Apex predators? Doc's scarred hands never paused in their work, but something shifted in his quiet voice. "Are only apex until something higher up the food chain comes along." His words carried the weight of someone who'd faced far worse predators in places where survival meant more than just money or reputation. Sarah had barely reached her car when 5 motorcycles roared up the gravel drive, their chrome gleaming in the morning sun. The leader, Viper, cut an imposing figure in his black leather adorned with crimson snake emblems. His face, marked by a distinctive serpentine tattoo, twisted into what passed for a smile. The tattoo seemed to writhe with his expression, a perfect match for his reputation for striking without warning. Doc watched them approach, hands loose at his sides. To the untrained eye, he looked like any other middle-aged farmer about to learn a harsh lesson. But Sarah, from her car, noticed how his stance had subtly changed, the same way it did before a thunderstorm, when the very air seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of lightning. She'd seen that stance before, in combat hospitals where seemingly harmless patients could suddenly reveal lethal capabilities. Behind Viper, 4 riders spread out in a practiced formation. Their patches identified them as Ghost, Razor, Tank, and Wolf, names chosen to intimidate. Yet Doc noticed something in their movements, a military precision that spoke of training beneath the criminal veneer. He recognized the telltale signs of combat experience, wondering what paths had led fellow veterans to this dark brotherhood. "Nice setup you got here, old man," Viper called out, killing his engine. "Shame if anything happened to all these pretty flowers." He swung off his bike, boots crushing delicate lavender stems with deliberate force. But times are tough, you know? 500 a week keeps the bugs away. Consider it. Health insurance for your plants. Doc's eyes tracked the crushed plants, specimens from Hannah's original garden, carefully tended for their healing properties. Each stem had been cultivated from seeds she'd collected during their last trip together, before the cancer took her. His voice, when it came, carried no threat, but something in its calm made two of the riders exchange uncertain glances. "Those plants help veterans with PTSD sleep at night," he said quietly. "They're not for crushing. Hannah's garden helps heal people who've seen too much darkness. It deserves respect." Viper laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe we should pay that veterans clinic a visit, too. Bet they could use some protection. Lot of vulnerable people there. Be a shame if something happened to them." The air grew very still. Even the morning birds fell silent. Doc's hands remained relaxed at his sides, but now they held the stillness of a surgeon before an incision, or a soldier before the shot. The fog swirled around them, turning the scene into something out of a dream, or a nightmare, depending on what happened next. "Last chance," Doc offered, his voice carrying across the lavender field. "Leave the farm, leave the clinic, leave this valley. After that, things get complicated." The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake Pine Ridge County to its core, though none of them yet knew just how far the ripples would spread. In the moment before violence erupted, the morning fog hung suspended, like nature itself holding its breath, waiting to see what happened when predators challenged someone who had spent his life learning the true meaning of being dangerous. Viper's laughter died in his throat as he caught something unfamiliar in Doc's steady gaze. But pride and reputation demanded he press forward. "Boys," he called out, pulling on thick leather gloves studded with steel. "Teach Farmer John here what happens when people don't appreciate our protection services." Tank, a mountain of a man whose muscles strained his leather vest, moved first. His meaty fist swung in a practiced arc aimed at Doc's head, the kind of punch that had ended dozens of confrontations before. But this time, something impossible happened. His target simply wasn't there anymore. Doc's movement was liquid grace, a combat dance perfected in far deadlier arenas than this peaceful valley. Tank's momentum carried him forward into empty air, and before he could recover, a precise strike to his solar plexus left him gasping in the lavender rose. "Military training," Ghost observed quietly, his hand tightening on a chain wrapped around his fist. "Marines?" "Navy," Doc corrected, his stance relaxed but ready. "Now we can discuss this civilly, or—" Razor and Wolf attacked together, combat knives appearing in practiced hands. Their coordination spoke of military background, rangers by their movement patterns. But Doc had trained people like them, knew the rhythms of their combat choreography. He redirected Razor's blade into Wolf's jacket, pinning them together momentarily as he swept their legs from under them. "Stand down!" Doc's voice carried command presence, the tone that had once directed traumatized SEALs through battlefield chaos. "You're better than this thuggery." Ghost moved next, more cautious after watching his companions fall. His chain whistled through the morning air in deadly patterns. "Nothing personal, old man. Business is business." "No." Doc caught the chain with one hand, using its momentum to pull Ghost off balance. "Business is running a store, tending a farm, helping people heal. This is just bullying with extra steps." A precise nerve strike left Ghost crumpled beside his fallen companions. Viper's serpentine tattoo seemed to writhe as his face contorted with rage. "You're dead, farmer. Nobody disrespects the Crimson Serpents." He drew a heavy custom revolver, but before he could level it, Doc closed the distance. What followed was a lesson in the difference between trained violence and true combat expertise. Doc's movements were economical, precise, born from years of high-stakes operations where hesitation meant death. The gun went flying, followed quickly by Viper himself. Sarah watched from her car, phone recording everything as Doc efficiently disarmed and disabled 5 hardened gang members without causing serious injury. It was like watching a master surgeon remove a tumor. Precise, careful, but thoroughly effective. You know, Doc said conversationally as he zip-tied the groaning men with their own bike chains. 3 of you have military training. Ghost, Force Recon by your CQC style. Razor, Wolf, Rangers. Probably 75th Regiment based on your coordinated attacks. You were warriors once. Now you're just bullies with fancy patches. Sheriff Elena Martinez arrived 5 minutes later, her deputy's car raising dust on the gravel drive. She surveyed the scene. 5 notorious gang members secured and sitting in the lavender field, their leader sporting what would become an impressive black eye. Jesus, Doc, she sighed, but there was respect in her voice. Couldn't leave the excitement back in the teams? They threatened the clinic, Elena. Doc was already replanting the crushed lavender stems with practiced care. Sarah's patience, Hannah's garden. Some lines you don't cross. The sheriff nodded grimly, remembering her own tours before taking the badge. Been meaning to have a chat with our Serpentine friends anyway. Got reports of protection rackets across 3 counties. She turned to her deputy. Call for transport and get statements from Ms. Chen. As the fallen gang members were loaded into patrol cars, Doc noticed Ghost watching him with an odd expression. You could have killed us, Ghost said quietly. Multiple times, why didn't you? Because you're lost, not evil, Doc replied, gentle but firm. I've seen evil. You're just men who forgot there are better ways to find brotherhood than fear. Sheriff Martinez pulled Doc aside as her deputies finished processing the scene. This isn't over, you know that, right? Viper's got 30 more riders, and they won't let this stand. No, Doc agreed, looking over his purple fields where violence had briefly intruded. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Sometimes people need to hit rock bottom before they can start climbing back up. As law enforcement cleared the scene, Sarah finally emerged from her car, medical bag in hand. Anyone need patching up? She asked, ever the nurse. Just their pride, Doc replied, accepting a fresh cup of now cold tea. Though I suspect that needed adjustment anyway. The morning sun had burned away the fog, revealing a changed landscape. Word would spread quickly through Pine Ridge County. The quiet lavender farmer was more than he seemed. But none of them, not even Doc, could predict how this small victory would spiral into something much larger. The seeds of change had been planted, watered with unwitting violence, and were about to bloom into something remarkable. In his holding cell, Viper seethed with plans for revenge. But Ghost sat quietly, remembering the stillness in Doc's movements, the control, the offer of a better path. Sometimes, he thought, the most important battles are the ones that make you question which side you're really on. Word of the confrontation at Hope Valley Farm spread through Pine Ridge County like wildfire. By sunset, Sheriff Martinez's phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from concerned citizens and reporters trying to verify the rumors. 5 members of the notorious Crimson Serpents, including their feared leader Viper, taken down by a lavender farmer with military precision. In the county jail, Viper nursed his bruised ego along with his swollen face. His lieutenant, a man known as Cobra, listened through the cell phone as Viper spat orders. Get everyone together. I want that farm burned to ashes by morning. Nobody humiliates us and lives to tell about it. Boss, maybe we should think this through, Cobra suggested, watching other Crimson Serpents gather at their clubhouse on the outskirts of town. Something's not adding up about this farmer. Ghost was Force Recon. He doesn't go down easy. Are you questioning me? Viper's voice turned venomous. That piece of dirt made us look weak. The Crimson Serpents rule through fear. If we let this stand, every farmer and shopkeeper in 3 counties will think they can resist us. At the Veterans Clinic, Sarah Chen was dealing with the aftermath in her own way. The waiting room was packed with concerned veterans who'd heard about the morning's events. Doc's garden is more than just flowers, she explained to the gathered crowd. His lavender treatments help half the vets in this county sleep at night. We can't let them destroy that. Jim Peterson, still struggling with PTSD from his Iraq tours, spoke up from his wheelchair. Then we stand with him. I haven't slept more than 2 hours a night for years until Doc's treatments. Those thugs want to take that away? They'll have to go through us first. Back at Hope Valley Farm, Sheriff Martinez supervised as her deputies finished gathering evidence. "Doc, you need to accept protection. When the rest of the Serpents find out about this..." She paused, watching him tend to the damaged lavender plants with military precision. They've never let an insult go unanswered. Last month they torched the miller's barn just for being late with a payment. "I appreciate the concern, Elena," Doc interrupted gently, his hands never stopping their careful work. "But I can handle myself. These plants need attention now. Shock can kill them as surely as crushing." The sheriff wasn't giving up. "Sir, there are at least 30 more gang members out there. Their reputation depends on revenge. This isn't the Navy anymore. You don't have a SEAL team backing you up." Doc's eyes scanned the horizon, checking sight lines and approach routes with ingrained habit. "No, I have something better. I have a community worth protecting." At the local diner, young Tommy Chen, Sarah's 16-year-old son, listened intently to the bikers at the counter. They didn't notice the quiet busboy as they discussed plans for the night's retaliation. His heart racing, Tommy slipped out the back door. He had to warn Doc. Meanwhile, at the clubhouse, Cobra couldn't shake his unease. He'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan, and something about the way Doc had fought seemed hauntingly familiar. "Check this out," he told his fellow riders, showing them his phone. He'd been digging into Doc's background. Moved here 3 years ago after his wife died. Bought the farm from her family. But before that, nothing. It's like he didn't exist. "Cobra, we've got our orders," Snake Eyes, their enforcer, growled. "Tonight we show Pine Ridge County what happens when you disrespect the Serpents." But Cobra noticed something telling. The veterans among their ranks looked uncomfortable. They'd seen the video Sarah had uploaded before the police confiscated her phone. The way Doc moved, the precision of his strikes, the control. That wasn't just military training, that was something else entirely. At the sheriff's office, Deputy Wilson brought Martinez a concerning report. "Boss, we're picking up chatter. They're mobilizing everyone, even calling in members from other chapters. This is going to be big." Martinez grabbed her radio. "All units, stage near Hope Valley Farm. Discreet positions only. And someone get me the state police on the line." The sun was setting over the lavender fields when Tommy Chen arrived, out of breath from running. "Doc, they're coming tonight, all of them. I heard them planning at the diner. They're going to burn everything." Doc calmly poured the boy a glass of water. "Catch your breath, son. Then tell me exactly what you heard." As Tommy relayed the overheard plans, Doc's tactical mind was already working. The farm's layout, the approaching routes, the resources at hand, pieces falling into place like a combat operation. But this time the objective wasn't destruction. These weren't insurgents or enemy combatants. These were lost warriors who'd forgotten their way. "What are you going to do?" Tommy asked, wide-eyed. Doc checked his watch, remembering similar briefings before more lethal operations. "Sometimes, Tommy, the best way to win a fight is to help your opponent remember who they really are." As night fell over Pine Ridge County, various forces were assembling. The Crimson Serpents gathered in force, their bikes gleaming under the rising moon. Law enforcement positioned tactical units discreetly around the area. And at the Veterans Clinic, Sarah Chen looked at the group of determined former soldiers who'd refused to leave. The stage was set for a night that would change everything. The only question was whether one former SEAL could transform an act of revenge into something entirely unexpected. The real battle wasn't for territory or respect. It was for the soul of a community and the redemption of warriors who'd lost their way. The old chapel basement hummed with nervous energy as Doc addressed the gathered townspeople. Sheriff Martinez stood by the door, her deputies strategically positioned around the building. Outside, the distant rumble of motorcycles grew steadily louder, like approaching thunder. "Everyone stays here until it's over," Doc instructed, his voice carrying the quiet authority that made people listen. "Sheriff Martinez and her deputies will keep you safe." His eyes met Sarah's determined gaze. "No arguments, Sarah. You too." "The hell with that," Sarah declared, standing firm. "Hannah would never forgive me if I let you face this alone. Besides, half those men are veterans who might need medical attention before this is over." "It's your farm they're coming to destroy," Jim Peterson protested from his wheelchair, his PTSD-haunted eyes clearer than they'd been in months. "Everything you've built, the garden that helps us sleep at night." "Buildings can be rebuilt," Doc replied, checking the zip ties on his belt. "Lives can't. And these men, they're not just gang members. They're lost warriors. Tonight isn't about fighting. It's about remembering." Sheriff Martinez pulled Doc aside as the motorcycle sounds grew closer. "State police are still an hour out. You sure about this? I've got 12 deputies, but they're bringing at least 30 riders. Numbers don't win fights, Elena. Never have." Doc's eyes held the certainty of someone who'd faced worse odds in darker places. "Besides, I'm not planning to fight them all." Back at the farm, Doc worked quickly and methodically. To any observer, his preparations might have seemed strange. He wasn't boarding up windows or setting up barricades. Instead, he was strategically positioning work lights, adjusting irrigation systems, and setting up his treatment area where he prepared the lavender remedies. The Crimson Serpents gathered at their staging point, the largest assembly of the gang in years. Cobra watched as Viper's replacement, a brutal enforcer called Rattler, paced before the assembled force. "This ends tonight," Rattler's voice carried over the rumbling engines. "After we're done with his farm, no one will dare stand against the Serpents again." But Cobra noticed something odd. Their most violent members were cheering, but some of the veterans in the group looked uncomfortable. He recognized the look. He'd seen it in the mirror often enough. It was the face of men who'd seen enough violence in their lives. "Snake Eyes, take the east approach," Rattler ordered. "Cobra's team hits from the west. I want that place surrounded." "Boss," Cobra spoke up, his military instincts screaming. "Something's not right. Reynolds had hours to clear out, but my sources say he's still there. Alone." "Good," Rattler grinned. "Makes it easier." "No," Cobra insisted. "It makes it suspicious. No normal farmer stays to face 30 armed men alone." Rattler's hand shot out, grabbing Cobra's jacket. "You questioning me too? Want to end up like Ghost and the others in County?" "I'm trying to keep us alive," Cobra shot back. "I served, Rattler. The way Reynolds moved this morning, the way he set us up, he's not just some farmer." "Don't care if he's goddamn Superman," Rattler snarled. "Tonight he's a dead man." The bikers roared off into the darkness, splitting into their assigned groups, but Cobra held back, watching through his night vision scope. Something about the farm's layout had changed. The work lights created strange shadows, and the equipment wasn't where it had been that morning. At the chapel, Tommy couldn't sit still. "We should be helping him," he insisted. Sarah put a hand on his shoulder. "Watch and learn, child. The quietest men are often the most dangerous. Doc's not just preparing for a fight, he's setting a stage." Deputy Wilson frowned at her radio. "Sheriff, we're getting reports of movement at the Serpents clubhouse. Looks like—" A distant explosion cut her off, followed by the orange glow of fire lighting up the night sky. "That's impossible," Martinez said. "All their guys are headed to Doc's farm." "Not all of them," Tommy grinned. "I might have mentioned where they keep their fuel supplies to a certain farmer." Back at the farm, Doc stood in his darkened barn, listening to the approaching motorcycles. His hands moved automatically through familiar motions, but instead of checking medical supplies or weapons, he was preparing lavender sachets and therapeutic oils. The muscle memory from his SEAL days had never left him, but tonight it would serve a different purpose. The first wave of bikers hit the irrigation pipes he'd repositioned. Their bikes slipped in the mud, the work light strategically placed to destroy their night vision while leaving long shadows where Doc could move unseen. The chaos had begun, but not the kind they were expecting. "Spread out!" Rattler's voice carried over the confusion. "Find him!" But Doc was already moving, a shadow among shadows. One by one, bikers found themselves disarmed and disabled by an opponent they couldn't see. Years of special operations experience merged with intimate knowledge of the farm's layout and a deeper understanding of what these men truly needed. "He's picking us apart!" someone shouted. Cobra, watching from the road, saw the pattern. "Son of a... He's using tactical sweep formations, just like..." His eyes widened with sudden recognition. Oh, hell. He's not just military. He's Tier 1 Special Operations. The night that was meant to destroy Hope Valley Farm was about to become something entirely different. A beginning rather than an end. A chance for lost warriors to find their way home. The question wasn't whether Doc could win this fight. It was whether he could help these men remember what they'd forgotten about true brotherhood. Rattler, enraged by his men's inability to corner one farmer, grabbed a gas can from his bike. Burn it! Burn it all! But when he tried to splash fuel on the barn, he found the can filled with lavender-scented water. All their fuel reserves had been destroyed in the clubhouse explosion. Looking for this? Doc's voice came from the darkness. He held up several fuel cap keys. Never leave your supply lines unprotected. Basic tactical error we learn in the teams. Rattler spun around, firing his pistol blindly. The shot went wide, and suddenly Doc was there, disarming him with practiced ease. The gang leader found himself face down in the mud, his arm locked behind him in a hold familiar to any special operations veteran. "You know what your biggest mistake was?" Doc asked quietly, his voice carrying across the now silent farm. "Not the protection racket, not threatening my farm. It was forgetting who you really are. Ghost, Cobra, Snake Eyes. How many of you wore uniforms before you wore those patches?" The fight had lasted less than 30 minutes. When Sheriff Martinez arrived, she found 20 bikers zip-tied and sitting quietly in the barn. Another 10 had fled into the night, but what happened next would truly change Pine Ridge County forever. Inside the warmly lit barn, the captured serpents sat in an odd silence. The fight drained from them. The scent of fresh lavender and motorcycle oil mingled in the air as Doc moved among them. Not as a captor, but as something else entirely. He checked their injuries, offered water, and, most surprisingly, asked questions. "2nd Battalion, 4th Marines?" Doc asked one of the younger members, noticing his faded tattoo. "3 tours in Iraq," the biker muttered, then looked up sharply. "How did you—" "The way you moved during the fight. Marines have a distinctive style." Doc handed him a cup of herbal tea. "Fallujah?" Similar conversations sparked around the barn as Doc identified more veterans among the captured bikers. 15 in total, including Cobra, who watched the exchanges with growing understanding. The night that was meant to destroy Hope Valley Farm was becoming something entirely different. "You're not just some farmer," Cobra finally said, the pieces falling into place. "The way you set this up, the fields as a kill zone, the lights for disorientation, the supply line disruption. That's SEAL tactics." The barn fell silent. Rattler, still secured but now sitting on a hay bale, jerked his head up. Doc confirmed quietly. 15 years, retired as senior chief. Mostly classified operations. Several of the veteran members straightened instinctively, military bearing returning automatically. "That takedown you used on Tank," Cobra continued, turning to his fellow veterans. "That was special operations, hand-to-hand, and the way you used the terrain, we never stood a chance." Sarah chose that moment to enter the barn, ignoring Doc's exasperated look. She carried her medical bag and a large basket of sandwiches. "Well, if you boys are done trying to burn down my friend's farm, I brought some food. Can't think straight on an empty stomach." The absurdity of the moment, an army nurse offering refreshments to captured gang members, broke the tension. A few bikers actually laughed, the sound strange but genuine. "Sarah," Doc started, but she cut him off. "Hush now. Hannah always said you'd forget to eat if someone didn't remind you." She began distributing sandwiches with professional efficiency. "Besides, Tommy tells me most of these boys are veterans. No veteran goes hungry on my watch." The mention of Tommy made several bikers shift uncomfortably, remembering chasing the kid earlier. But Sarah acted as if she was serving lunch at the veterans clinic, her calm presence defusing the lingering tension. "Mrs. Chen," one of the veteran bikers spoke up, "we're sorry about earlier, with your son." "Eden Mirza Sweetabakika Rishamisar my food," Isamadig Senderiade Bekorika said a good start toward making amends, Sarah replied firmly. Now, who needs medical attention? Sheriff Martinez arrived to find an almost surreal scene. Captured bikers eating sandwiches while Doc and Cobra discussed shared experiences from Afghanistan. Dave, Doc called out to her deputy, I think we might have a solution that doesn't involve filling up your jail. I'm listening, Martinez said cautiously. Doc gestured to the veterans among the group. These men aren't criminals at heart. They're warriors who lost their way, found the wrong kind of brotherhood. Cobra nodded slowly. The Crimson Serpents. It was supposed to be about having each other's backs. Somewhere along the way, under Viper's leadership, it became about intimidation and fear. Here's my proposal, Doc continued. Those who want to change, who want to find a better path, I'm offering you a chance. The farm needs help. More importantly, I know other vets who need help. People who understand what you've been through. Rattler sneered. You're crazy if you think. Shut up, Rattler, Cobra cut him off. For once in your life, just shut up. He turned to Doc. What exactly are you offering? The seeds of change had been planted. In the warm light of the barn, surrounded by the healing scent of lavender, a new kind of brotherhood was about to take root. And it all started because one former SEAL believed that even the hardest hearts could change when given the right soil in which to grow. 1 week after the confrontation at Hope Valley Farm, the morning quiet was broken by the rumble of motorcycles. But this time, they came not to destroy, but to rebuild. Cobra led a group of 15 former Serpents up the gravel drive, their bikes gleaming in the early sun. Still can't believe we're doing this, Tank muttered, looking uncomfortable without his usual gang patches. His bruises from the fight had faded, but his pride still smarted. Better than jail, Snake Eyes reminded him, eyeing their old clubhouse's burned remains in the distance. Besides, after what happened to Rattler and his loyalists, they'd all heard how Rattler's crew had tried to ambush Doc at the local diner 3 days after the barn incident. The fight lasted exactly 20 seconds. Rattler ended up with a broken jaw and a 5-year sentence, while Doc calmly finished his lavender tea. Doc stood waiting by the barn, his posture relaxed but alert. Glad you made it. Hope you all had breakfast. His eyes noted the absence of gang colors, the tentative way these hardened men carried themselves now, like soldiers returning to base after too long in hostile territory. Sarah sent us with these. Cobra held up a basket. Said something about growing men needing proper food. The former Force Recon Marine had emerged as a natural leader among those choosing rehabilitation over retaliation. Of course she did. Doc smiled slightly. First thing we need to do is clear the damaged fields. Those bikes tore up quite a bit of soil, and the lavender's sensitive to root disruption. The work was hard, but none of the men complained. They'd expected harsh treatment, militant discipline. Instead, they found something unexpected: respect. Doc worked alongside them, teaching rather than commanding, sharing knowledge gained from years of turning battlefield precision into healing growth. See these plants? Doc demonstrated proper transplanting techniques to Ghost, who'd shown a surprising talent for detailed work. The roots tell you everything. Just like in combat, you need to read the signs, understand what's beneath the surface. By mid-morning, Sarah arrived to set up the first counseling session in the converted barn office. Who's first? She asked, clipboard ready. The men exchanged nervous glances until Cobra stepped forward. Guess that's me, he said. Lead by example, right? As Cobra disappeared into the office, Deputy Wilson pulled up in her patrol car. She'd been assigned as liaison for the rehabilitation program. How's it going? Better than expected, Doc replied, watching Tank carefully showing Tommy how to check soil pH levels. They're warriors at heart. Just needed a new mission. The local news crew showed up around noon, drawn by the unusual sight of former gang members working a lavender farm. Doc kept them at a distance but allowed a few photos. These men deserve privacy while they rebuild their lives, he told the reporters firmly. As the men worked the land, stories began to emerge. Ghost had been a combat medic before PTSD drove him to the gang. Tank lost his family to divorce after 3 tours left him unable to readjust to civilian life. Each had sought brotherhood in the Serpents, finding temporary relief in violence and intimidation. "It's strange," Cobra commented during a water break, watching the others work. "In the gang, we thought we were free, but we were just building another prison." That afternoon, Kevin Jang arrived from his apple orchard, his arm still in a cast. Everyone tensed, remembering they were the ones who'd broken it, but Kevin just wheeled a cart of apples up to Tank. "Heard you used to be a mechanic," he said gruffly. "My tractor's been making a noise. Want to take a look?" More community members began stopping by. Maria Gonzalez, whose restaurant had once paid protection money, brought homemade tamales. "My grandfather always said hungry men can't think straight," she declared, setting up an impromptu feast in the barn. The former bikers were bewildered by the acceptance. "Why are they doing this?" Ghost asked Doc quietly, accepting a plate of tamales. "Because that's what community means," Doc replied. "When I came back from my last deployment, this town helped me heal. Now it's your turn." As evening approached, Sarah returned with more food, accompanied by Jim Peterson from the Veterans Clinic. "The VA's interested in your program," Jim announced. "They're talking about official funding for veteran rehabilitation." "Never thought I'd see the day," Sheriff Martinez commented, watching her former adversaries discuss farming techniques with local growers. "You sure about all this, Doc?" "They're not bad men, Elena." Doc paused, remembering his own struggles after leaving the teams. "Sometimes the hardest part of war is coming home." "Sue." The sheriff nodded thoughtfully. "Rattler's trial starts next week. His hardcore followers are looking at serious time, but the DA's agreed to alternative sentencing for anyone who completes your program." As the sun set, the men prepared to leave. They'd accomplished more in one day than any of them expected. The damaged fields were cleared, new lavender seedlings planted, and the first counseling sessions completed. "Same time tomorrow?" Cobra asked, wiping sweat from his face. "Be here at dawn," Doc confirmed. "And Cobra, tell the others, the ones still on the fence, the door's open if they want help." The seeds of change had been planted. Now they just needed time to grow. 2 weeks into the rehabilitation program, trouble arrived in the form of 50 motorcycles roaring into Pine Ridge County. The Black Vipers, a notorious rival gang from the next state, had caught wind of the Crimson Serpents' apparent weakness. Doc was teaching a group of veterans about lavender distillation when Cobra rode up fast to the farm. "We've got problems." Cobra killed his engine, face grim. "Big ones." "Black Vipers?" Doc asked calmly, though his eyes had already started scanning the horizon with familiar tactical precision. "They're at Kevin's orchard right now, threatening Tank and Ghost. Word got out about our change in management." Cobra's hand unconsciously touched the empty space on his jacket where the serpent patch used to be. At the Jang family orchard, Tank and Ghost were facing down the Black Viper's leader, a monster of a man known as Executioner. Both former serpents had been working legitimate jobs there for 2 weeks, helping repair equipment and tend the trees. "Look at you two," Executioner sneered, knocking over a crate of freshly picked apples. "Mighty serpents playing farmer, drawing honest paychecks. Viper was weak, but you're pathetic." "Leave it alone, Executioner," Tank warned, his massive frame tensed but controlled. "We're done with that life." "Nobody's done until we say they're done," Executioner kicked over a tool cart. "Your territory is up for grabs. And these nice folks?" He gestured around the orchard. "They need new management." Kevin Jang wheeled himself out of his office, his healing arm still in a cast. "This is my property. Get out before I call the sheriff." Executioner laughed, the sound like gravel in a blender. "Call whoever you want, old man. By the time they get here, they're already here," came Doc's quiet voice from behind them. The Black Vipers turned to find Doc standing there, accompanied by Sheriff Martinez and Deputy Wilson. Behind them, trucks and cars were pulling up, carrying more former serpents and townspeople. "This isn't your business, farmer," Executioner growled, his hand moving toward his jacket. Actually, it is. Doc stepped forward. Tank and Ghost work for Kevin. Kevin's a friend. That makes it my business. Executioner looked around at his gang. 50 of us, one of you. I like those odds. You might want to check your math, Sheriff Martinez commented as more vehicles arrived. Former Serpents who'd joined the rehabilitation program were pulling up alongside dozens of townspeople. Even Sarah was there, her medical bag ready. This is what you left the Serpents for? Executioner taunted Tank and Ghost. Playing gardener with some local hero? No, Tank replied, standing straighter. We left because we found something better than fear. We found purpose, community. Ghost stepped forward, moving to stand beside Doc. And we're not alone. Executioner's face darkened. You're dead. All of you. He reached inside his jacket. But what happened next became another Pine Ridge County legend. Before Executioner could draw his weapon, Doc moved with the liquid speed that had made him legendary in the teams. The giant biker found himself disarmed and face down on the gravel, his own knife pressed against his neck. Now, Doc said conversationally, maintaining his hold on Executioner, we're going to have a civilized discussion about territory and respect. The Black Vipers reached for weapons but froze as Sheriff Martinez's deputies emerged from strategic positions, weapons ready. More importantly, they found themselves surrounded by determined townspeople and reformed bikers standing shoulder to shoulder. See? Here's the thing, Doc continued, his voice carrying to everyone. Pine Ridge County isn't just some territory to be carved up. These people aren't marks for your protection racket. They're my friends, my family. Our family, Cobra corrected, stepping forward. The other former Serpents nodded. So, you have two choices, Doc went on. Leave now and spread the word that Pine Ridge County is off limits, or, he applied slightly more pressure, making Executioner gasp, we can continue this discussion at the sheriff's station, your call. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then one of the Black Vipers gunned his bike and took off. Others followed quickly. Within minutes, only Executioner remained. Okay, Executioner wheezed. We're gone. Pine Ridge is yours. No, Doc corrected, helping him up but maintaining a firm grip. Pine Ridge belongs to its people. Remember that. As the Black Vipers retreated, Kevin Jang approached Tank and Ghost. Well, boys, that was an exciting lunch break. Now about that tractor you were fixing. The casual return to normalcy broke the tension. People began dispersing, though many headed to Sarah's house. She'd announced an impromptu celebration dinner. That evening, the farm's barn was packed. Former enemies sat together sharing Sarah's cooking while Doc led a group therapy session. The Black Viper's appearance had shaken some of the veterans, bringing up old traumas. I almost went for a weapon, Ghost admitted during the session. Pure instinct. But you didn't, Doc reminded him. You chose a different path. That's what matters. Looking around the barn, Doc saw Tank teaching Tommy about engine maintenance while Sarah supervised. Cobra was discussing plans for a veteran-run security company with Kevin Jang. Sheriff Martinez watched it all with a thoughtful expression. You know? Deputy Wilson commented, joining them. When you took down Rattler and the Serpents, I thought that was impressive. But this, she gestured at the scene before them, this is the real victory. The transformation wasn't just physical. It was written in the faces of men who'd found their way home. Late summer sun painted Hope Valley Farm in shades of purple and gold, a far cry from the tense night of confrontation 3 months ago. The transformation was evident everywhere. New buildings had sprung up alongside the original barn. The lavender fields had expanded, and most remarkably, the sound of motorcycles no longer brought tension to anyone's shoulders. Got another call from the state VA office, Sarah announced, entering Doc's new classroom where he was teaching advanced cultivation techniques to 20 veterans. 3 more counties want to copy our program. They're sending representatives next week. 500 a week, Ghost muttered from his seat, drawing surprised looks. Remember? That's what Rattler demanded for protection. Now we're helping that many vets a month with these plants. The program had grown beyond anyone's expectations. What started as a simple alternative to jail time had blossomed into something extraordinary. The former Serpents, now calling themselves the Valley Veterans Coalition, had become an integral part of the community. "Doc," Cobra called from the doorway, "got a situation outside you need to see." Outside, a group of rough-looking bikers waited nervously. Not Black Vipers or any known gang. These were independent riders, veterans who'd heard about the program through the grapevine. Their leader, a hard-faced woman with sergeant's stripes tattooed on her arm, stepped forward. "Name's Hawk," she said directly. "Did 3 tours in Iraq. Got 15 vets here who need what you're offering, if it's real." Doc studied the group, recognizing the familiar signs of trauma, of warriors lost in civilian life. "It's real," he confirmed. "But it's not easy. This isn't just about avoiding trouble or learning to farm. It's about healing. That's what we're here for." Hawk's voice held steady, but her hands trembled slightly. "Tried everything else. VA, drugs, therapy, drinking. Nothing works. Heard your lavender program was different." Sarah, who'd followed them outside, stepped forward with her clipboard. "First things first. Full medical evaluations for everyone. Then we'll start you on the basic treatment protocol. Doc's lavender helps, but it's just part of the program." Inside the main office, Sheriff Martinez was meeting with representatives from neighboring counties. The program's success had attracted attention from law enforcement agencies dealing with similar issues: veteran-heavy communities, bike gangs, addiction problems. "It's not just about rehabilitation," Martinez explained, gesturing through the window where Tank was teaching motorcycle maintenance to a group of troubled teens. "It's about transformation. These men and women aren't just avoiding crime. They're becoming community leaders." The evidence was everywhere. Ghost had started a mobile medical clinic, combining his combat medic skills with Doc's herbal treatments. Cobra ran a successful security company, employing fellow veterans to protect the same businesses they once extorted. Even the old Serpents clubhouse had been converted into a community center. "But it's not all smooth sailing," Doc cautioned during the afternoon staff meeting. "We're getting more requests than we can handle. Some people are trying to copy our program without understanding it. We need structure, training protocols." Already on it, Sarah pulled out a thick binder. "Been documenting everything. Treatment plans, counseling methods, cultivation techniques. We can train other facilities, but they need to do it right." The challenges were significant. They needed more space, more resources, but solutions seemed to appear just when needed. Kevin Jung offered his unused orchards for expansion. Maria Gonzalez organized a network of local restaurants to provide meals. The Valley Veterans Coalition handled security and maintenance. That evening, as the sun set over the expanded fields, a new group of motorcycles approached. But these riders wore different patches: VA officials, state rehabilitation coordinators, even a few federal program directors. "Quite a change from 3 months ago," Cobra observed, watching the officials park their bikes. "Remember when we thought this place was an easy target?" "Speaking of targets," Ghost added, "heard from my contacts that 3 more gangs are thinking of moving into the area. Word is they think we're soft now." Doc continued carefully harvesting lavender, his movements precise as ever. "Let them come," he said quietly. "Everyone needs a chance to change." The evening's orientation session for new program participants filled the main barn. Hawk and her group sat among former gang members, troubled veterans, and local volunteers. Sarah led them through the basics while Doc prepared treatment packages. "This isn't magic," Sarah explained to the newcomers. "The lavender helps with anxiety and sleep, yes. But the real healing comes from purpose, community, and understanding. You're not alone." Later, under the stars, Doc found Hawk sitting by the lavender fields, breathing deeply of the calming scent. "First night's the hardest," he said, offering her a cup of tea. "Keep expecting it to be a trick," she admitted. "Everything good in civilian life usually is." "No tricks here." Doc sat beside her. "Just people who understand what you've been through. Tomorrow, we'll start you on the cultivation program, working with these plants. It gives your hands something to do, while your mind heals." A shooting star traced across the sky, and for a moment, the farm was silent except for the gentle rustle of lavender in the evening breeze. The transformation of Hope Valley Farm was far from complete, but something remarkable was taking root, not just in the soil, but in the hearts of warriors who'd finally found their way home. The morning calm at Hope Valley Farm was shattered by the urgent arrival of Deputy Wilson. Her patrol car kicked up dust as it skidded to a stop outside the main barn, where Doc was conducting the morning briefing with the newest group of veterans. "Rattler's out," she announced without preamble. "Early release for good behavior, but that's not the worst part." Doc's face remained composed, but his eyes took on the focused intensity his former SEAL teammates would have recognized. "Tell me." "He's joined forces with the Demon Riders MC. They're not just any gang. They're an organized crime syndicate with chapters in 5 states. Our sources say they're mobilizing. All of them." The news spread through the farm like wildfire. Inside the counseling office, Sarah watched her patients' reactions carefully. Many of the veterans, especially the newer ones, showed signs of combat stress returning. Hypervigilance, tension, the old demons stirring. "How many?" Cobra asked, his tactical mind already working the problem. "At least 100 riders," Wilson replied. "Maybe more. They're calling in members from other chapters. Rattlers convinced them the Valley Veterans Coalition is a threat to their entire operation." Doc moved with purpose toward the main office, already formulating plans. "Get everyone together, not just our people. The whole community needs to know what's coming." Within hours, the farm's main conference room was packed. Sheriff Martinez stood before a map of the county marking potential approach routes. "They'll likely come from multiple directions. Their main chapter has a compound here." She pointed to a location 50 miles north. "But they've been gathering forces from all over." "It's not just about revenge," Cobra added, his intelligence network having provided crucial information. "The Demon Riders see what we've built here as a threat to their entire business model. Other gangs are watching. If our rehabilitation program succeeds, then their power over lost veterans breaks," Doc finished. "They lose their primary recruitment pool." Sarah stood, medical records in hand. "We have 73 veterans in active rehabilitation across our programs. Many are still dealing with PTSD. A violent confrontation could undo months of therapy. Not to mention the community support we'd lose if this turns into a war," Deputy Wilson added. Doc studied the map, his special operations training kicking in. "We need to evacuate the satellite facilities. Bring everyone here where we can protect them." "That's over 200 people, counting staff and families," Pastor Roberts noted from the doorway. No one had heard him arrive. "Where will we put them?" "The summer camp," Sarah suggested. "It's empty this season, plenty of cabins, good security setup. My construction crews can fortify it," Kevin Zhang offered, his once broken arm now fully healed. "Got lumber and materials ready to go." The Valley Veterans Coalition moved with military precision. Within hours, convoys of trucks were discreetly relocating rehabilitation program members. Local businesses provided supplies. Community members opened their homes. Doc coordinated from the farm, which had become their command center. "Never thought I'd see Iron Knights and Road Warriors working together," Ghost commented, referring to 2 formerly rival gangs whose members had gone through rehabilitation. "They're not Iron Knights or Road Warriors anymore," Hawk replied, directing the evacuation of their newest members. "They're Valley veterans now." By nightfall, the evacuation was complete. The summer camp had been transformed into a fortified sanctuary. Local law enforcement established perimeters. The coalition set up patrol routes, but Doc knew this was just the beginning. "They'll try to draw us out," he told the leadership team gathered in the main barn. make us look like the aggressors, turn the community against us. Already starting, Deputy Wilson reported, checking her phone. Social media's lighting up with rumors. They're painting us as a rival gang, saying we're the ones causing trouble. Then we show them who we really are, Doc decided. The next morning, the Valley Veterans Coalition launched Operation Community Shield. Teams of reformed veterans wearing their new uniforms began providing free security for local businesses. Others helped elderly residents with home repairs. Medical teams offered free checkups in underserved areas. Local media covered their efforts. Testimonials poured in from families whose lives had been changed by the rehabilitation program. Churches and civic groups publicly endorsed their work. "See what you did," Sarah told Doc, watching the news coverage. "You didn't just teach them to fight differently, you taught them to live differently." But the demon riders weren't finished. That evening, 3 suspicious fires broke out across town. As first responders rushed to handle them, dark figures were spotted near the elementary school. The coalition was ready. Teams of reformed veterans coordinating with police intercepted the would-be bombers before they could plant explosive devices. "They're trying to terrorize the community," Sheriff Martinez said during their nightly briefing. "Make people too afraid to support us." "Then we'll show them what real strength looks like," Doc replied, his quiet voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. That night, as thunder rolled across the valley, Doc stood a watch at the farm. The calm before the storm felt familiar. He'd experienced it many times during his SEAL missions. Cobra joined him on patrol. "You know, when I was with the Serpents, I thought strength meant making people fear you," Cobra mused. "Now I understand it's about making them trust you." Lightning illuminated the valley, and with it, hundreds of headlights approaching from multiple directions. The demon riders had arrived. The storm was about to break, and with it would come their greatest test yet, not just of their ability to defend what they'd built, but of their commitment to transformation itself. The hundreds of approaching headlights cast an eerie glow across Hope Valley Farm. Doc watched from his tactical position as the demon riders surrounded the area, their numbers even greater than intelligence suggested. At least 200 bikes, their engines creating a thunder that echoed off the mountain slopes. "All units check in," Doc spoke quietly into his radio, his voice carrying the same calm it had during countless SEAL operations. "Summer camp secure," Ghost reported. "All rehabilitation members safe." "Town perimeter covered," Tank confirmed. "Police and coalition in position." "Community center locked down," Deputy Wilson added. "Emergency services standing by." The Demon Riders' leader, a man known only as the Judge, pulled up to the farm's main entrance. Unlike Rattler's brash aggression, the Judge carried himself with cold calculation. His leather cut bore no patches except a simple scale of justice, twisted and broken. Beside him, Rattler's face still showed traces of the beating he'd received months ago. "Reynolds," the Judge's voice boomed across the property. "Come face your judgment." Doc stepped into the light alone, his casual stance betraying none of the combat readiness beneath. "Kind of dramatic, don't you think?" "You've undermined everything we stand for," the Judge snarled. "Turning predators into prey, making warriors into farmers. Your little rehabilitation program threatens our entire way of life." "No," Doc replied calmly. "I helped lost men find their way home. Big difference." The Judge signaled and his riders revved their engines threateningly. "Last chance, shut down your program, send our people back or we burn everything." "Your people?" Doc raised an eyebrow. "They're not property. They're men and women who chose a better path." "Then you choose war." The Judge raised his fist, ready to signal the attack. "Actually," Doc smiled slightly, "I choose this." Suddenly, lights blazed on all around the valley. The Demon Riders found themselves surrounded not by police or armed forces, but by the community itself. Hundreds of townspeople stood shoulder to shoulder with the Valley Veterans Coalition. Farmers on tractors blocked escape routes. Construction vehicles created barriers. Church buses formed impromptu blockades. See, while you were gathering your army, Doc continued, we were reminding these men what real brotherhood looks like. From within the Demon Riders' ranks, dozens of riders suddenly pulled away, removing their gang colors to reveal Valley Veterans uniforms underneath. The judge's eyes widened as he realized the truth. They'd infiltrated his own organization with rehabilitated members. Your own people chose us, Hawk emerged from the shadows, because we offer something you never could, redemption. The judge reached for a weapon, but Doc moved with lightning speed, disarming him effortlessly. Not happening, not here. More Demon Riders began removing their colors. They'd seen the success stories, heard about second chances. Some had family members in the rehabilitation program. The fearsome army was dissolving before their eyes. This is what strength really looks like, Doc addressed the remaining riders. Not fear, not violence, but community. Choice. The change. He gestured to the Valley Veterans. Join us. Find a better way. And pie, Sarah's voice carried from the porch where she stood with her ever-present basket. Change always goes better with pie. The tension broke. Several Demon Riders actually laughed. They'd heard about Sarah's legendary baking through the rehabilitation grapevine. You have a choice, Doc continued. Stay and fight against an entire community ready to defend its own. Or, he gestured to the Valley Veterans, join us. Find a better way. The judge, his power visibly crumbling, made one last desperate move. Anyone who turns code is dead. We hunt you down like... A new voice spoke from behind the townspeople. Cobra emerged, holding up a flash drive. Got enough evidence to take down your entire operation. Been undercover in your organization for weeks. FBI is very interested in your connections to drug trafficking and weapons smuggling. Sheriff Martinez stepped forward. Your choice, Judge, but choose carefully. The judge's face went ashen as more riders began removing their colors. The intimidation that had built his power was useless against something stronger. Hope. Face it, Doc said quietly. Your way is finished. The only question is whether you're smart enough to change with the times. What happened next would be talked about for years in Pine Ridge County. As dawn broke over the horizon, nearly 100 former Demon Riders stood in line at the farm, turning in their colors, signing up for rehabilitation. The judge and his few loyal followers were arrested without incident, their criminal empire collapsing as evidence was revealed. Tommy, recording everything on his phone, captured the moment perfectly. Former enemies sharing Sarah's pie, townspeople helping newcomers fill out registration forms, Valley Veterans welcoming their former rivals as brothers and sisters. This is crazy, Ghost said, watching the scene. A year ago, we were terrorizing towns like this. Not terrorizing, Doc corrected, transforming them, and ourselves in the process. The morning sun rose over a changed valley. The night that was meant to destroy their work had instead validated it in the most powerful way possible. The Valley Veterans Coalition wasn't just a rehabilitation program anymore. They were a movement. As news spread of what happened at Hope Valley Farm, requests for help poured in from across the country. Law enforcement agencies, veterans groups, and communities struggling with gang violence all wanted to learn from their success. The Valley Veterans Coalition found themselves at the center of a movement larger than anyone had imagined. We're going to need help, Doc told the leadership team gathered in the main conference room. We can't do this alone anymore. The room, once a simple barn office, now buzzed with activity as coordinators managed programs across 3 states. We were never alone, Sarah reminded him, organizing intake files for 30 new veterans who'd arrived that morning. That's been the whole point. She paused, looking at the photos on the wall, hundreds of before and after transformations showing the power of second chances. The Valley Veterans began developing training programs, sending teams to help other communities set up their own rehabilitation centers. Cobra headed the security training division, teaching former gang members how to protect rather than intimidate. Ghost's medical program had expanded to include mental health services and addiction recovery. "We don't just patch wounds anymore," Ghost explained to a new group of combat medics during their orientation. "We heal the invisible ones too, the ones that led us down dark paths in the first place." Tank, who'd once been the Serpent's enforcer, now ran the youth outreach program. His auto repair classes had become so popular that the local high school added them to their curriculum. "See, rebuilding engines isn't that different from rebuilding lives," he told his students. "You just need the right tools and patience." Hawk, proving to be a natural leader, coordinated with VA hospitals across the region. "The lavender treatment is just the beginning," she explained during a conference call with medical directors. "It's about creating a complete healing environment. Community, purpose, understanding." Even those who'd once opposed them became supporters. Kevin Zhang's orchard had expanded into a training facility for agricultural therapy. Maria Gonzalez's restaurant network provided culinary training for veterans transitioning into civilian careers. The former Demon Riders compound was being converted into a rehabilitation center. Sheriff Martinez, recently promoted to county commissioner, shared some surprising statistics during the monthly community meeting. Crime rates down 70% across 5 counties. Gang activity almost non-existent. But here's the real success. Veteran suicide rates in our area have dropped to near zero. The transformation wasn't just in numbers. It showed in small moments. Former rivals working together on community projects. Veterans finding peace in the lavender fields. Families reuniting as the healing spread beyond individual members to entire households. One morning, a familiar face appeared at the farm. Judge Thompson, who'd presided over many gang-related cases before the program began, arrived unannounced. "Had to see it for myself," he said, watching former gang members teaching gardening techniques to troubled teens. "In 30 years on the bench, I've never seen anything like this." Doc led him through the expanded facility, now covering several hundred acres. The original lavender fields had multiplied, their purple blooms a symbol of transformation. New buildings housed counseling centers, training facilities, and rehabilitation dormitories. But it was the people who truly showed the change. "Remember him?" Doc pointed to a man carefully tending young plants. 3 years ago, you sentenced him to 10 years. We got him into the program instead." "Michael Roberts," the judge remembered. 3-time offender? Violent gang history." He watched as Michael patiently showed a group of veterans how to transplant seedlings. "I would never have believed it." "People can change," Doc said quietly. "They just need the right environment to grow." The program's success attracted attention from unexpected places. Government agencies studied their methods. Other countries sent representatives to learn their techniques. But they never forgot their roots. The simple farm where it all started, and the belief that even the hardest hearts could change. Sarah found Doc later that evening, standing in the original lavender field where he'd first confronted the Serpents. "Penny, for your thoughts?" "Just remembering." He smiled slightly. "All those months ago, when Rattler and his crew thought they'd found an easy target, never imagined it would lead to this." "Hannah would be proud," Sarah said softly. "This place helps more people than any hospital I've worked in." The sound of motorcycles approached, but now it brought smiles instead of tension. Another group of veterans arriving for the program, led by coalition members who'd once been their rivals. The sun setting behind them painted the sky in shades of purple, nature matching the lavender that had started it all. "You know what the real miracle is?" Cobra asked, joining them. "It's not just that we changed, it's that we showed others they could change too." He gestured to the new arrivals. "Every person who finds their way here becomes a seed of transformation in their own community." Doc nodded, watching the newcomers being welcomed by those who'd walked the same path before them. The cycle of healing continuing, growing, spreading like the lavender that had given hope to so many lost warriors. 5 years after the first confrontation at Hope Valley Farm, Doc stood in the original lavender field watching the sunrise, his morning coffee steaming in the crisp mountain air. The farm had grown into a sprawling campus of hope. But this first field remained special. It was where everything changed. "Thought I'd find you here?" Sarah's voice carried across the morning dew. She wasn't carrying her usual basket of food, but rather 2 letters. "This one's from the White House. They're confirming next month's Presidential Medal of Freedom ceremony." But that wasn't what brought the smile to Doc's face. It was the other letter Sarah carried, postmarked from Montana. "Our first satellite program's graduation ceremony," Sarah explained. 50 former gang members, all veterans. "And Doc," she smiled, "they're growing your lavender strain too. Hannah's heritage lavender seeds, carefully preserved by Sarah after that first violent night, had become a symbol of transformation. Every new rehabilitation center started with these plants, a living reminder that growth comes from nurturing, not force. The morning calm was broken by the familiar rumble of motorcycles, but these riders wore different colors now. The Valley Veterans Coalition emblem, a rising sun over crossed lavender stems, had become a symbol of hope across the country. Tank led the convoy, returning from an emergency response mission in tornado-hit Oklahoma. "You should have seen it," Tank reported, his face tired but proud. Former demon riders working alongside Black Vipers helping rebuild homes. Even the locals couldn't believe it. The coalition had become the largest veteran disaster response organization in the country, their reputation for turning former enemies into allies making them uniquely qualified for bringing communities together in crisis. At the training center, Rattler, released early for good behavior, and now a program graduate himself, was teaching a class on conflict resolution. "Strength isn't about who can hurt who," he told his students. "It's about who can help heal." Ghost's medical program had expanded beyond physical care. "We don't just patch wounds anymore," he explained to a new group of combat medics. "We heal the invisible ones too. Every trauma, every addiction, every lost soul looking for home." Cobra, now advising the Department of Justice on rehabilitation programs, brought the latest numbers. Over 15,000 graduates nationwide, 100 rehabilitation centers, a 97% success rate. But the real success stories were in the details. Tommy, who'd grown from a scared kid hiding from bikers to running the coalition's youth outreach program, had just opened their 10th youth center. The former Demon Riders scout who'd tried to infiltrate them years ago now coordinated their anti-trafficking initiatives. Sheriff Martinez, recently elected state governor, shared some surprising statistics. "Remember how we used to track gang territories? She asked during her visit. "Now, we track transformation zones, areas where our graduates are actively rebuilding communities." The old Serpents Clubhouse, once a symbol of fear, had become the Coalition's National Training Academy. Its walls, which once planned violence, now displayed success stories, thousands of before and after photos showing the power of second chances. As evening approached, the farm hosted its annual community dinner. Tables stretched across the fields where battles once raged, former enemies breaking bread together, sharing stories of transformation. Kevin Zhang's apple pies competed with Maria Gonzalez's tamales for popularity, while children played safely under the watchful eyes of those who'd once terrorized these same streets. "You know what the most powerful therapy turned out to be?" Sarah asked, watching the gathering. "This community belonging purpose." Pastor Roberts nodded in agreement. "When we started, we thought we were just stopping violence. Turns out we were rebuilding souls." Sarah's pies, naturally, had their own table. "Can't celebrate proper without dessert," she insisted, though her medical bag was never far away. Some habits die hard, and healing came in many forms. Doc stood to address the gathering, something he rarely did. 5 years ago on this very field we had a choice: meet violence with violence or try something different. We chose to believe in the power of second chances. He gestured to the transformed campus around them. But what we really built wasn't buildings or programs. We built proof. Proof that it's never too late to change. that the hardest hearts can soften when given the right soil to grow in. As the sun set over Hope Valley Farm, Doc walked the grounds one last time. Every step held memories. The spot where he'd first confronted the serpents, the barn where enemies became allies, the fields where lost souls found their way home. Cobra joined him carrying 2 cups of coffee. You know what I realized? We're not really growing lavender here. We're growing hope. Doc smiled, remembering Hannah's words from so long ago. Sometimes the smallest seeds yield the biggest harvests. The Valley Veterans Coalition had become more than an organization. They were living proof that transformation was possible, that enemies could become family, that warriors could find new battles worth fighting. And it all started because one former SEAL believed in second chances, a nurse wielded healing with love, and a community chose to build bridges instead of walls. As night fell over the valley, the lights of the campus glowed like stars fallen to earth, each light representing a life transformed, a heart healed, a warrior who'd found their way home. The seeds of change had grown into a forest of hope, spreading far beyond Pine Ridge County. And somewhere, Doc knew, Hannah was smiling.